Reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus told his disciples this parable. A man going on a journey called in his servants and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to a third 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. Immediately the one who received 5 talents went and traded with them and made another 5. Likewise the one who received 2 made another 2. But the man who received 1 went off and dug a hole in the ground and buried his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants came back and settled accounts with them. The one who had received 5 talents came forward, bringing the additional 5. He said, "Master, you gave me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more." His master said to him, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Since you were faithful in small matters, I will give you great responsibilities. Come, share your master's joy." Then the one who had received 2 talents also came forward and said, "Master, you gave me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more." His master said to him, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Since you were faithful in small matters, I will give you great responsibilities. Come, share your master's joy." Then the one who had received the 1 talent came forward and said, "Master, I knew you were a demanding person, harvesting where you did not plant and gathering where you did not scatter. So out of fear I went off and buried your talent in the ground. Here it is back." His master said to him in reply, "You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I did not plant and gather where I did not scatter? Should you not then have put my money in the bank so that I could have got it back with interest on my return? Now then, take the talent from him and give it to the one with 10. For to everyone who has, more will be given and he will grow rich. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And throw this useless servant into the darkness outside, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Considering that last Tuesday was Veterans Day, I wish to begin with a brief story about an amazing man from Wisconsin named Bob Whelan. He served in Vietnam as an Army combat medic, and in June of 1969, and I was only 3 years old then, Bob's unit walked into a Vietnam minefield. And when one soldier from his unit was wounded by a mine, Bob rushed to help him with first aid. Unfortunately, Bob also stepped on a mine and he ended up losing both of his legs. Well, Bob's promising baseball career was suddenly wiped out in a heartbeat. Yet, as Bob once said, "I lost my legs, but not my heart." After finally leaving the hospital, he went to California State University majoring in education. And after college, he became a physical trainer for the Green Bay Packers. And in 1986, he inspired millions of people around the world by completing the 26-mile New York City Marathon in 4 days, going the whole distance on his hands in leapfrog fashion. 2 years later, he finished the 26-mile Los Angeles Marathon, and he did the Ironman competition in Hawaii. And then, as a way to raise money for Vietnam veterans, Bob ran across the entire U.S. on his hands, taking 3 years, 8 months, and 6 days to go coast to coast. To this day, Bob is a Christian motivational speaker covering topics from conflict resolution to beating the odds and achieving your goals. And since 2012, he's been embarking on a 50-state speaking tour for a 5-year period, encouraging people to give more than they think they can give, going the extra mile. Isn't that an amazing story? Bob Whelan is a shining, inspiring example of what Jesus is teaching us in this gospel passage from Matthew today. To invest oneself well and wisely with whatever you have, not just for your own benefit, but for others' benefit. And Bob is very much like those first 2 servants that we hear about in this gospel story, the one with the 5 talents and the one with 2 talents, who make the most of what their master gave them and ask them to do with it. Now, one thing I think we need to clear up right away is what we mean by the word talents in this story. Many people are confused about that. Now, when we hear the word talent, what do we think of usually? Well, we think of something to describe our natural abilities or learned skills that can improve with much practice, like strengthening our intelligence, playing a musical instrument, or perhaps playing a sport, just to name a few things. Yet that's not what Jesus is referring to here, so get that out of your mindset right away. And nor is talent a kind of coin. Talent, in this passage, actually indicates weight. It's a measure of how much an item, let's say gold or silver, weighs, so that a value of money can be determined from that. It's the way they did things back 2,000 years ago in the Middle East. So when we hear these 3 guys receive 5, 2, and 1 talents from their master before he leaves for a very long time on a journey, it doesn't sound like at first that they are given very much with those small numbers until you start figuring out the weight and value behind each of those talents. Now, money back then in Jesus' time were usually in gold, silver, or copper coins. And one of the common coins used back in Jesus' time was called a shekel. And according to one estimate I saw on the internet several days ago, it takes about 3,000 silver shekels to equal just 1 talent. And it weighs about 72 pounds altogether. So by today's standards, 1 shekel would equal $11.76. Now, if we suppose that that 3rd guy with the 1 silver talent, which is about 3,000 shekels, at $11.76 apiece, if I can read that correctly, that would be around total value of about, in today's money, $35,000. And a guy with 2 silver talents would have weight of silver worth over $70,000. And a guy with 5 talents would have over $175,000. So the possessions that the master left his 3 servants were no small potatoes by any means. So based on those estimates, this first servant doubled the master's money and now had $350,000 in value. The second guy doubled his money to $140,000. And what about the 3rd guy? Well, he certainly kept it safe, doing what Jewish law would say is the safest way to protect money from theft. He buried it in the ground. And if we looked at Luke's version of the same story, the 3rd guy didn't even do that. He put it carelessly in a napkin. Certainly not the smartest place to protect your money around the house, especially if it's somebody else's money. So what does Jesus mean with this whole story, this scenario? Well, first off, I think it's very easy to figure out that you and I are the servants he's talking about here. And Jesus is like the master of this story, who literally gave everything that he had, even his very life, in the hopes that we would find new life and thrive with it. He trusts that we'll fully use all that God has blessed us with, hopefully investing it all in what God wants, not just what we want. He doesn't want us to just hang on to it for him till he returns, but he wants us to make good with it. And whenever our time is through on this earth, especially when we least expect it, he will ask us to give a final account of how well we invested what he gave us. And certainly, in that judgment time, God doesn't want a bunch of excuses like this third servant as to why we didn't invest. Things like why we chose to bury God's love and not show it to some people. Or why we didn't go to Mass each week like Jesus wants us to give thanks to his Heavenly Father. Or why we didn't share more of our time and goods with those who are starving to death or living in utmost poverty and terrible conditions. Notice that the third guy with the one talent is not being punished for bad investing here. Why is he being punished? Because he didn't invest at all. He just buried it. Think of all the good that he could have done with that one talent, an estimated worth of $35,000. Now, if you had that much money, would you just go and bury it in the ground or hide it in your mattress at home? Probably not. I'm sure you can think of a lot of good things to do with $35,000. So I think this is a great challenge for us to think about how we may have blown opportunities in our lives of investing for God and investing in God with what God has given us. Chances maybe to love better, to forgive more, to learn about his ways more, to help the needy more. You know, many people blow chances out of fear, just like this third servant said he was afraid. Sometimes we don't try hard enough or give enough because we're afraid of failure, or perhaps of being rejected. So how can I go and ask for forgiveness from this person? This person's probably just going to yell at me and make me feel like a jerk even more and just totally reject me, so you don't even try to ask for forgiveness. Many invest in the wrong things. Things that seem more pleasing at the moment: material goods, drugs, alcohol, promiscuous sex, gambling, right down the line. But all of those things are ultimately less important in life in the grand scheme of things, aren't they? And many may miss a lot of good chances to grow just due to sheer laziness. Sitting around the house playing couch potato, eating chips, drinking beer or pop, watching the tube for about 8 hours a day or whatever. Or perhaps people may be angered by or disappointed by God, not answering their prayers enough the way they wanted it. Or maybe disappointing the church, so they hold back on investing better with God's gifts to them. You know, true faith involves taking risks, doesn't it? You know the expression, take the leap of faith? That means being willing to take a risk. Just like Bob Whelan did. And just like the two servants who invested their master's money. They didn't know how well that all those investments would work out, but they sensed that somehow they had to do something to make a difference. And it may be tempting for many people to think that they don't have that much to give, perhaps from low esteem or something. So they might end up doing what the third servant did, just bury what they have in the ground, not use it at all, not even try. Yet the first two servants teach us that the more we use and give of what our master has given us, well, the rewards we can reap from that are monumental, aren't they? Remember this: greatness in God's eyes is not measured by what we have, but it's measured by what we do with what we have. That's the big difference. So use your talents well and wisely for God, in the hopes that when your life is through, you can happily report to God and hear the same words that these first two servants heard from their master: "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Come on in."